I propose we start. Welcome. This is the second survey cadence session of the day. Today, this afternoon, we're going to talk about survey scheduling, how we're going to monitor it throughout operations, the reminders are the usual about the code of conduct and rules of interactions for this meeting. This meeting is governed by a code of conduct, which you have all agreed to, which ensures that this is a safe space and a welcoming space for every participant. Please attain to the rules of the code of conduct. Including, please consider the level of comfort with physical interaction that people have. We're still in times of COVID. That is indicated by the sticker on the badge of the participants if they chose to put one. Please also be respectful of their social battery. Live meetings in person, if meetings on Zoom tend to be very draining. So be aware of that and respectful. We have 3 points of contact for code of conduct violation. If you witness or suffer a code of conduct violation, please reach out to Sandrine Thomas, Andrew Connolly, or myself. You have their emails on this slide. We're also obviously on the Slack. Oh, that's not us. We're also obviously available on Slack on the various Slacks of Rubin. Rubin adheres to the principles of kindness, trust, respect, diversity, and inclusivity in order to provide a learning environment that produces rigor and excellence. And this is our community, and we can choose to make it what we want. Let's choose to make it compassionate and supportive. If you're a remote participant, please mute yourself if you're not directly interacting with the speakers and asking a question. If you're an in-person participant, raise your hand. We will bring a microphone to you. Wait until the microphone arrives so that people online can hear your question or comment, as well as the people in the room. And we also have a Slack channel for the session, so feel free to post questions on Slack. We do have a chat on Zoom. I suggest perhaps questions are posted on Slack rather than on Zoom, so that we have to monitor only one channel as the speakers speak live. But if you're on Zoom, you can also raise your hand and request to speak by unmuting yourself and just speaking loud. That's all I had to say. As reminders, this is the team that is speaking to you today. It's a survey scheduling team led by Lynn Jones, who is online. Hello, Lynn. Peter Joachim and Eric Nielsen, who are here in the room on the first row, and they will be speaking throughout the session. The survey strategy team is responsible for optimizing the observing plan for LSST, together with the survey cadence optimization committee. They provide the simulations and run the science metrics on the simulations of the survey strategy that then the COC reviews and evaluates to come up with a recommendation that assembles and integrates community feedback. They maintain the scheduling software, which we will talk to you about briefly today, the brain algorithm of the scheduling software. They evaluate and mitigate impacts of changes in observatory performance and survey performance, and they monitor the scheduler performance intranight, daily, weekly, quarterly, and yearly, and this is what we're going to talk about today. And in fact, here to talk about it is Peter.
All right, thanks everybody. So the scheduler is in use, which is great. We've been on Oxtel for 2 years, but now we have gone to the Simone telescope and we are actively steering Simone with the feature-based scheduler. We call it that because most of the time it uses a Markov decision process, and that uses features to decide where to point. And up here, you can see the science validation survey, a simulation of it, of what we want it to look like. Basically, we cut the footprint down of the main survey, but are running pretty much the regular algorithm just on that limited footprint to exercise every part of the scheduler that we can to make sure it works. And then at the bottom is that full 10-year simulation of what we think will happen. So my favorite thing to watch on YouTube is when people take their Tesla to downtown Seattle and turn on self-driving mode because they go berserk. And so you can see there's a pillar for for the monorail support with a big no left turn sign, and the Tesla is trying to turn right into it. And so this is the danger of self-driving things. We are trying to turn on self-driving for the telescope. And so our engineering team is much smaller than Tesla's as well, I'll point out. But the great thing is we have not driven into any pillars. There's the simulation of what we wanted. And then from last night, we said, okay, what have we collected so far and simulated forward? And they look very similar. It's the scheduler doesn't indeed appear to be doing what we wanted. We haven't tipped over, we haven't thrashed the filter. The commissioning team has uncovered a few bugs, and we've been able to patch those and deploy them quickly so we can make changes to the scheduler brain faster than they can change the temperature in this room, apparently. So we're doing good, but of course we want to continually monitor, continually watch, have our hands over the wheel in case things go wrong, or if conditions change, if the road changes, we need to be able to make changes. And so Eric and Lynn are going to talk about the constant monitoring, constant vigilance we're going to have as we progress through the survey. Question? Oh yeah, here, I got
So in the OnSky visits, just to the far right of the strip,
yes.
what is that? What are those observations down there?
I can tell you about that if you like.
Okay.
Those are the TO visits that happened 2 nights ago.
Yes. So yep, that was the TOO. Yeah. So one of the bugs we had, it went to the TOO and it didn't want to stop observing the TOO. So we're glad we caught that in commissioning. So now we'll be sure to not only observe TOOs that come in, but then stop observing them and go back on the road. Okay, and then I will hand it off to Eric to talk about our monitoring.
Okay, so a few different things happen at the end of each night. It's at the day of's rollover if you care, or shortly thereafter. One thing that happens is a set of simulations get run for the next 3 nights, just to update what the scheduler thinks is going to happen. Another thing that happens is a report gets automatically generated. It used to be done through Times Square. Now it's done just in a separate automated process that produces an HTML page. There are also, we're working on automating the generation of reports of survey progress. That's going to be, that automation is going to start up pretty soon here. And there will also be monthly reports with status and forecasts out to the end of the survey. The monthly reports will not be entirely automated, but will be sort of a combination between automated processes and someone sitting down and thinking, okay, what's really important enough to put into the report? Okay, so the first bit, the simulations at the end of the night. Our piece of that is just generating the simulation, and we also generate a report that's just letting the observers and us know what we think is going to happen. There's also a OBSLOCTAP service, which is not ours. We feed them our simulations, but that is sort of outside of the scope. The actual serving of it is outside of the scope of the scheduling group. There's still some hiccups with this simulation. The piping for making sure that the same version and same configuration of the scheduler gets run for the preview of the night is actually seen as going to be run at the time is not really working well yet, but we're getting there. Okay, so daily summary reports. There's at the end of each night, there's a summary of what happened the night before with a handful of different plots. There are a couple I show here. Use slightly different projections than usually used for cosmology stuff because these projections make it a little easier for survey planning because you can sort of use them as a mental planisphere to figure out, okay, what's observing when and what's going to be available at what time of year, and understanding how exactly what progress is made fits in with when we'll be able to do stuff later. They also include plots of progress that's been made so far, split out by band, also on the same projection, so we can see how we did. And you can't really make it out in this plot, but the plot actually does have the visits we did last night overlaid on the progress, so we can see, oh, is it filling in holes or what's it doing? The progress reports are probably the least well-developed of our various reports. But the idea is to give a daily snapshot of how have we been doing on the survey. And here are just a few examples of the progress report. The one on the left is a cadence plot. So I think you may have seen some of these before. Each of the horizontal panes represents a different DDF field, and each of the vertical bars represents a different night of observing, and the heights of the bars in different color represent the depth that we achieved on those nights. We also have hourglass plots, and we can make these for pretty much any parameter that can be derived from the basic sets of parameters that come out of the ConsDB, or we can easily derive from them. So the idea is these are hourglass plots. So each horizontal line represents a night, and the horizontal spacing along the line represents a time during the night, and the color represents the value of whatever parameter you're plotting at that time. The yellow lines here the dotted yellow lines represent moonrise and moonset. The thick yellow line represents moon transit, and you can see some interesting things about scheduler behavior right off by looking at this. So if you look on the hourglass plot to the left, on say nights 8 through 15, you can see before the sun transited, the scheduler started going more and more to the west as the moon came up, and then the moon transited and it flipped over to the other side of the moon. And you can see that transition nicely happening right along the moon line. You can also see on the plot on the right, the correlation between then when the moon is up and which filters get emphasized. But we are actively looking for what kinds of parameters would be most valuable to have on a short page that summarizes summary of how the survey is doing so far. We have a lot of things available to us. We don't want to just throw everything on there. So if you have a favorite number that you want, this is how I want to look. This is what I want to look at, how we've been doing so far. We're interested in coming up with a small selection that gets regularly generated and posted on this page. We also, on the night summary, I showed you a couple of things on our shorter version of the night summary. We also have, at this point, only for within the project, a much longer version of that, and we are trying to figure out which pieces of that should go in the shorter version that everyone will routinely look at. But if you're interested in the shorter version, and you can log into the RSP, then you can see the full set of everything we have. Another thing we have, again, requires logging into the RSP, is a Times Square notebook that can be used to look at ConsDB out parameters, so basic parameters for the nights. So you can use Times Square as a tool for generating templated Jupyter notebooks. The particular Jupyter notebook we have looks at the ConsDB and generates some sort of high-level summary things, including things like efficiency over the night for each night that you've in the window you select, how long it took from the nominal start of observing to when you actually took the first exposure, and similarly at the other end of the night, how long was it between the last exposure ending and the nominal end of exposure. There's also a plot on there that lets you plot ConsDB values versus time. We also have a Times Square notebook for tracking slew times. Slews and other overheads are important things to model when you're doing the simulations, so that it's getting the model to actually represent what the telescope is actually doing is vitally important to us. So these plots showing, comparing our modeled versus actual visit gap serve two purposes. One is to help us refine our model, and they also help identify times where there were longer gaps than expected. And you can see our model is generally doing pretty well, but there's still a fair number of outliers. So for the longer term progress reports, these are much more on these days. There will be some pieces of them that get more and more automated, but ultimately there'll be a person deciding what's important to look at. One of the features of what we're doing, it's sometimes hard to see what progress we're actually making just by looking at the snapshot right now. And so one thing we do is create a simulation that runs from now to the end of the survey and do the metrics at the end of that rather than the metrics right now. So it's sort of a, given what we've gotten so far, what do we predict we'll get? And so this is one example comparing our initial simulation with an updated simulation for SV. And this is another way of looking at it. The plot on the left, this is just cumulated number of visits. You have in the green what actually happened, in red the simulation sort of continues on from what actually happened at the end of the survey, and in blue our initial simulation. On the right, we have a plot of the actual at the values of a metric at the end of the simulation, and watch how that changes with time. Yes, Robert. Currently, we use the baseline weather and just paste it on to what the baseline is doing. We have been discussing doing something more elaborate of not just one simulation, but a suite of simulations.
We can't hear the questions online. Could you please repeat them?
Turned it on. Okay.
Okay.
Including me.
Is it okay now?
Yeah, I can definitely
we can hear him now.
Simon
Yes,
Yeah.
microphone.
Yeah. So the reason why we didn't do as well as we might have wanted to, I mean, because the weather wasn't good, it was cold, we didn't run, there's a snowstorm coming in, and those sort of statistics are available from the green part to do the extrapolation. And rather than using the ideal conditions that we assume for the 10-year survey. So this is an optimistic version by extrapolating forward. Is that right?
No. Can I comment on this?
Yes, Lynn.
Yes, thank you. So for the SV survey was a little bit special. So in the baseline survey, we do use our standard baseline weather and so on. For the SV survey, it's actually a little bit different because we wanted to have more downtime that was like spread across different chunks of the night. And so this was actually, it was developed with Keith. And so it doesn't actually, I should double check, but it doesn't actually include the same, like we lost the whole night due to weather. It has just a much higher fraction of we lost this time. So in the SV survey, after we got past that initial period where we expected to be on the sky for only 2 hours at a night, there's about 50% of the time that we expect to be able to use for the SV survey. So it doesn't quite include the historical weather in the same way as our baseline simulation. The seeing distribution is the same as in our baseline simulation, but the weather is a little bit different.
Let me ask it another way. Why, if you reran the simulation following the black line, would you get the green line or the blue line? I mean,
if I reran the simulation,
well, you say you run the simulation from 38 days on to infinity.
Yeah.
And so as to predict
so
to the end of the survey, to predict where we will get to. If you run that simulation from the very beginning, do you end up at the green line point or the blue line point?
If I go back and run it with this, so actually we do have this online. If you go to those survey strategy pages and you go back to like, I think I made one from the very first day, the first day after the first night. So if you look at the simulation we create there, you'll see what we would have assumed. And what you'll see is that I can't bring you to, guess, because, well, actually I could jump in for sharing, but what you'll see is that we actually, in those early simulations, we end up above the end of the blue line. Actually, you can see this in the right-hand plot here, right? Because you can see for a simulation, each of those little points on that plot are simulations that were created on that day. So a simulation that we ran on, I actually ran it yesterday, but starting from the 21st of June, it ends up predicting that we'll have many more observations than we would from the blue line. And the reason is because the blue line is including, the major difference there is not in the downtime, it's in the observatory model. So the observatory model, we're slewing a little bit faster than I assumed in the blue line simulation, basically. Though you are correct, we're not updating our weather model. It's not entirely obvious how we would do it given the limited amount of time that we've had available. But if you have, we can certainly go back and look and say, okay, given the number of nights that we've had so far and the number of nights we were able to be on Sky, let's also update our weather model and basically our system availability for the rest of the SV survey. And we do have some other things we need to fold back in. Basically, these like later simulations are times for us to be able to fold back in extra feedback like that, like the fact that will we be able to have the filters that we think we're going to have? Will we be able to, what are we seeing for the seeing or the efficiency? And at present, we haven't adjusted those, but those are things that would fold back. So the thing that we've adjusted so far is the observatory performance and the slew speed, but we haven't changed the availability.
And Lynn, we do intend to go to the live pages after the presentation. So if there's more, we can talk about that there.
Oh, great. Yeah, I thought that was the plan, so.
Yeah.
Okay.
I also want to point out that this something similar is going to happen, not just in SV, but in the ultimate survey. In the ultimate survey, the simulation being done will be using our latest, greatest, most up-to-date telescope model, weather model, everything, which we will of course be updating as time goes on.
Yeah, and this is why we have such a coupling to what's going on at the summit and why we need to understand like what's happening with the sleep time, what is the actual efficiency, and yeah, just as much as possible to bring in what we know from what we're seeing. So
Meg?
Hi, Meg Schwalm, Queen's University, Belfast. I guess when I worked at Gemini, we always had like a short night log that was like written by a human. I don't know if that's going to be something that happens for Rubin, but if, for example, like I currently can't follow the plots because they're not in the view I look at. So it's going to take a while to wrap heads around unless you plot it differently for maybe some of us. But say I look and I'm like, Rubin didn't observe much last night. I have no idea why. Like it rained half the night. There was a fault. The dome didn't move for 20 minutes because we were doing something. You know, I might not need to know that bit, but I might need to know that there were some technical issues to know that something went on. How are we going to know that with this stuff? So when we're looking and we're like, oh, the past 3 nights, like there's been ice on the dome.
yeah.
So-
Can I make a quick comment here? Because
Like,
Because-
yeah, I guess I'm just asking, is there ways these information will be linked together so we can understand that, whether it's a short human bio, description or something else?
Eric, can I make a comment?
Yes, Lynn, make a comment and then
Okay.
Robert.
Oh, okay, sorry. I was just gonna say, there is a night log, and Eric originally had it in the nightly progress reports or nightly summary reports that you had, but I told him to take it out because I felt like it wasn't quite being that succinct to be able to let you take that away from what happened, and also didn't necessarily it wasn't necessarily clear that it was what we wanted to send to everybody. So that is there. It is my fault a little bit that we're not already publishing some of that.
So let me answer this, Meg. So there is a night log, you can read it. It's rather verbose, it doesn't tell you what you want. We're also building a tool to give you a nightly digest, which is just beginning to appear. It'll tell you how much time we spent on which project last night, what the dead time was. It's supposed to give you a plot of when that dead time was, some of which are going to come from the same tool set as Eric and Lynn are using. So if you have access to USDF, I can show you where the prototype is on that. And that's why you're supposed to get the sort of what we did last night. And that's merged with the night log, which comes from the narrative log and is currently rather chattier than I would like and rather less precise than I would like. But that's the tooling we're working at to get you a summary of what we did last night or over the last week in a form that Kevin Reel is willing to skim in the morning. And that's what we're aiming for.
I was going to say, we did
Mike,
not.
I'll give you. Okay, great.
Yeah, so our aim is somewhat complementary, and we're trying to include enough in the scheduler version of it to provide enough context for understanding the scheduler stuff. So we're not trying to duplicate what Robert was referring to, but we're going to be having some overlap with it because some of the stuff there will be important to give context to what we're trying to present.
But I'm just going to say, as a community member, like I worked at Gemini, we wrote a overview that was short, like 5 sentences, what happened. And what I'm hearing is a lot of things that are overwhelming information. And I really highly recommend to make a night summary that is the short abstract of that. I can't read what you have because I don't have access to the USDF.
I think there is an action item for considering shortening the blocks, and maybe it's a job for an LLM. I don't know. Let's move on.
Okay. So I also want to point out that we can do these kind of metrics for any of the different math metrics to produce a scalar. For some of them, the kind of plot on the left makes perfect sense. For some of them, you really need to go to the plot on the right for it to make much sense at all. For example, if you're looking for a accumulated area over some depth, then it's going to, the plot on the left is just going to be 0 for a long time and then jump up. But the plot on the right will actually show how you're doing. Okay, and now I hand it over to Fed.
Actually, Lynn, do you want to, let's go to the
Okay.
next slide and have
Lynn.
Lynn.
Okay, so mainly all I wanted to say to these particular slides was, so we've talked a lot about how you can see what we've actually done last night and the nightly digest. I'm so sorry we didn't mention that here. It's not one of our products, so I didn't quite know where to mention it, but that is also another place, and we are working to try and figure out how we can join any of our content with the nightly digest content as well. But the whole point of monitoring the survey progress especially from the point of view of like, what do we do about the survey strategy, is that we want to get science out of it at the end. And so all of these metrics that people have contributed to help us guide the survey strategy to date. So these are things like the SRD metrics, but they also, and those come from the project, but they also include metrics from each of the collaborations, like the Transients of Variable Science, the DESC, Milky Way Local Volume, Galaxies, AGN, the Solar System Science, and across all of these wide science areas. These are all things that we can still evaluate as we're going through the survey. And then we can look at like, how are we doing in terms of progress for these? And do we need to, is some aspect of our as realized observations on the sky falling down in these areas? So next slide. Next slide.
Yep.
So it's basically, I just want to emphasize that those metrics are still extremely useful. We need to be able to understand how to know if the metric is still relevant and if it's still accurate. So if we're getting observations and the metric says, hey, you should be doing really great, and actually you're doing really poorly when you do your science, then we need to be able to close that loop and understand what's going on and what's different about what we're doing. So in these aspects, we as the survey scheduling team will still be counting on the SDOC, the Survey Cadence Optimization Committee, and the community to provide guidance about these metrics and to keep them, to help us update and close that loop about what are we doing and how are we actually doing. And so I also wanted to point out that the SOC will be releasing recommendations, including reviewing of this community input annually. They're a standing committee. And so these are still important to keep up to date. we really look forward to working with everybody about these. I'm going to hand it back to Fed because she might have something to say here too.
Yeah, just a quick reminder, most of you have been to Survey Cadence Optimization Committee sessions before, including perhaps the one that happened just this morning. The process of the Survey Cadence Optimization Committee and Survey Strategy Team have engaged in for now upwards of 10 years. It's an iterative process with the community, so we take input from the community, we synthesize it and optimize a recommendation, and this will continue to happen during the survey. The SCOC commits to write annual reports and renew recommendations annually on the survey strategy. We will set up a portal to get input from the community and receive concerns on an ongoing basis, and we commit to feedback on those in the annual report on an annual basis. I think that's really all that we wanted to say. Anything else? Let's take a couple of questions and then we can show you the web pages in a more interactive and live way. So maybe do you want to set that up, Eric? What I think? I saw Tony first.
So way back on predicting what's going to happen tomorrow to the public. A while back, I'm thinking several years back, we had a committee advising that you should also tell people what you're going to do next in the next hour. The reason why all of this is important is for co-observing with other observatories.
So I can take that. We do that. We forecast the pointing 48 hours in advance. Obviously, the scheduler, maybe if you want to add anything, but obviously the scheduler is automated. So changes on that forecast may happen, both including due to weather, any other issue. But the pointings are forecasted 48 hours in advance. MA public, yes, are forecasted to the public 48 hours in advance.
We're also attempting to publish just in time, in 2 visits ahead of where we're going, and what we actually did using OptiLoc-TAP, I think, for both of those, and that's just about being commissioned. So I think everything you've asked for, Tony, as usual, we listen to you and it's being done.
And in fact, co-observing is already happening with DACM.
So yeah, we published the predicted schedule 1 hour, like the 1 hour predicted schedule, then the next visit. And anytime we update the next hour, we publish it again. And that goes to OptiLoc-TAP.
And this is already enabling co-observing with DACM during science verification. I had seen other.
Yeah, so I'm going back to the previous discussion. So you kind of alluded that you will update the weather model and telescope model on every now and then. So is there like a preset cadence of how often you're going to do these updates, or you will just do it as needed? Because in some sense it might be useful going to do it once a year. I don't know. It's something when you have sufficient statistics, know how wrong your weather model is.
It's
Whenever we need to. Yeah, it's if you know it's broken, feel free to make a pull request. We'll approve it.
That's a fair question. Maybe
Oh, yeah.
once a year we should review it anyways.
Yep.
Just in case. John and then Vincenzo.
So, I mean, thinking about the question of the community feeding back on whether the metrics are being achieved and so forth, I guess I'm thinking that I'm going to see year 1 data sometime when year 3 is already being executed, right? And therefore, then it's going to go to the SCOC. And so it would be quick turnaround to respond even by year 4, right? Or year 5. I mean, like, are we sure that the science verification data and DP1 is adequate to assess all of these things? Or is it sort of just envision the second half of the survey will respond to the first couple of years of data?
So there's 2 aspects to this, and Leanne, if you want to jump in at any point. So certainly we hope that the science verification is enough to demonstrate the capability of the observatory and the data so that people can assess whether their science is possible and help us correct it. There's also a number of plans that are still under discussion about how we monitor the quality of the data during operations. We have a quality assessment team that is not called quality assessment. data validation team, and those teams will have components that are community facing, both on the survey strategy with the SCOC being community facing, but we're discussing how to make those teams also have contacts with the community. There's always the SAC, of course, but yes, obviously the data releases will happen at a delay. So yes, there is a contingent, the potential for things being spotted only at that point for a specific science case, but we're doing everything we can to avoid that.
I think so, but could you repeat the question again?
I guess my question was simply in the context of imagining the community trying to do science, really pushing on the data, discovering things that perhaps, you know, are not captured in the regular QA. It seems that it's sort of it would probably be year 4 or 5, given the data release schedules and so forth, before you could respond to things that were discovered from the first year, right? You know what I mean?
I understand the general problem you're describing. I certainly hope we can do better than waiting till year 4 or 5. That would- Now it's your fault. You're right. Yeah, yeah. Yeah. So
at the end of the year.
yeah. Okay, so
No, hold on. We could make a recommendation, like the SCC commits to making an annual recommendation. If something comes up, like it's not like we're gonna wait.
you can make recommendations whenever you want. It's how we're able to integrate them into our process. So DP2 is going to come out next year. We're still discussing the fine details of this, but it's going to be sometime next year. It will come out next year. Okay, I know some people are concerned that it might not come out by the end of 2026, Meg, but it will, I promise you. So we hope that that is a really rich data set with a lot of variety of fields and data in it, that you can do a lot of testing on that and give us feedback. And one of the advantages now of having a longer lead time into the first data release, which is now based on 1 year of data, is we will have a lot of time to iterate and work with you and incorporate a lot of that. So we hope to get a lot of that initially. But then as we get into the yearly cycle, we will have a process and a period by which recommendations from data release 1 can be taken in and included for the data release 2 processing. So we're still working on exactly what that looks like.
So if I could make then a suggestion to the wider, it would be really great if the Discovery Alliance or someone like, or NSF, of course, could sort of support the science collaborations and really pushing on the science verification data for the purpose of providing feedback to the project, you know, that kind of thing. Because otherwise, you know,
releases and to report that back to us, and then we will get that into the next round of processing. Yes, you know, and we will do that. I mean, and the process for DP2 for you, okay, but it's critical for you to do it. I mean, yeah. Well, okay, sorry, I thought you were providing the message to the project. I get it. Okay, well, we certainly, from the project side, we certainly hope you'll do this and give us this feedback. Yeah, but we'll probably continue and go ahead even if you don't.
And perhaps the recommendation is a little bit off topic because it's not like on survey strategy monitoring, but certainly point taken, the community needs to be supported to do the validation work because the validation work doesn't lead to a paper. So it's not work that you can very naturally fold into academic work schedule. So yes, I'm hoping that some of the POs from various agencies are listening and hearing us. Other questions? I had seen Vincenzo first and then I come back.
Vincenzo Pedrecca from INAF Napoli. So my question is related to the previous one. Do you think your current metrics, or would you like to have new metrics to assess if there is a minimum requirement that is respected with the cadence as soon as the survey progresses? I mean, you might miss some visits for one reason or the another. So do you think you're able to assess if minimum requirements for different science cases are satisfied, or do you have plans to adjust the cadence to fix them?
Right. So if the question is, do you think you have all the metrics to make sure in sort of real time that you're on track to satisfy science cases? I think the answer is no, because the majority of the metrics that the community has contributed are looking at the 10-year timeline. We can run some of them on an incremental basis. We can run some of them at like any point benchmark. Not for all of them that makes sense to us as the viewers of the metric, whether they're on track or not, unless, you know, it's something as trivial as like, I need to divide the rate by 10 because I'm running it annually. We could have more metrics for sure.
We can do some of that by running your metric at sort of the hybrid of actualized visits up until now, then simulated visits from now until the end. But a lot of the metrics only make sense when you sample them at the end. And so that's the required step there. And we do plan on doing that sort of hybrid actualized then simulated kind of tracking for some set of metrics, but that's what set of metrics is we're open to requests.
Right. And so let me add that I think, you know, having acknowledged that the community has worked very hard for a very long time on writing metric, and that also is not a job that naturally falls into your academic duties. So understanding that there is a resource issues always with this, but I do think that the people that have contributed metric may want to revise them once we are in operation to see how they really should interact with the real data, with the real observing schedule, and with the knowledge of the data as it comes out of the telescope once that arrives.
So sort of two questions. One is maybe the comment question. I honestly feel like if I ask my science collaboration, tell me what metrics to put in, they have no idea because they're always overwhelmed by every metric that is calculated within MAF and doesn't fully understand what they all mean. Partly because not everything is maybe as documented as the way we would think is full user facing, because this is different than what the CST team is doing, or they're not deployed to help with this. Where I would say is if I turned around today, I wouldn't be able to say, get a list of metrics. I think we need some help of understanding what you think is the baseline of things that are useful so that we can come back. And if I look at these web pages, I feel like I'm going to get overwhelmed, and I'm one of the few people that have thought about this for a while. So I would really like if there's something that you can be like, here's like the number of visits, we've already thought of that, or the number of pairs, because I know that, but I have to go dig back to even try to figure out what that metric is named. And I worry is you need this soon. And so I'm just wondering, is there a way that we can get, here's what we all thought was the reasonable things, and then easy, nice translation to astronomers, what those are, in a list that we can look at and digest, rather than having to re-educate people about what are all the MAF metrics, because some of us haven't looked at it in a while. And the other question is some stuff isn't going to be a MAF metric. MAF solar system metrics do not apply to real discoveries. It's a proxy. So how much of the prompt products stuff can we get in? Like, can you tell me how many solar system objects, solar system processing detected last night? Is that out of realm as a metric or not? I understand prompt products database needs to exist, but assume it does, say April next year. Are those things in scope? Or whether the prompt products database is not something accessible, so it might not be something you can put on a website yet. Can we have those things that, like, if it's something that's counting in prompt processing database, you could put it up here. Is that allowed to be a metric here, or is that not even in scope? Understanding that would help me figure out how to help my science collaboration give you those metrics you want.
So let me attack the first part. I think a good starting point is the subset of metrics that the SCOC has been using throughout. We have picked them so that they are comprehensively showing different science across all the science pillars and more. And we have picked them because we kind of understand them and they're more intuitive, at least to the SCOC. They respond more intuitively to changes than others. So that might be a good starting point. I also think that what we're doing in pre-operation and what we may do in operation will need to be reconsidered, because we may need to track things differently when we're dealing with real data and observations. Peter, do you want to add anything to the first part, Eric? So then the second part, the second part, I'm not sure I fully understood, but maybe. But wait, Lynn, maybe? Lynn, do I hear you?
Okay, yeah, can I make a comment? So make part of the thing about like the MAF metrics aren't relevant is part of where we need help to close the loop, right? Because if we say, oh, we should have discovered about this many objects, and you're saying, well, actually, we're sort of seeing what we think is about like 50% less. of the population, then we probably have a problem, right? Like when we run the math metrics on pointing databases which match the actual on-sky visits, and you say, no, this is not at all what we're seeing, that's where we need this help to close the loop to see, okay, is it because they're getting lost in the linking? Is it because they're getting lost somewhere else? In the other parts of the project actually also need this kind of information, I think, so that we can understand where we're missing, where parts of this are like less efficient than we maybe would have expected. So I do think that there's still a lot of work we need to do to turn the metrics we have into what we actually see. And I agree, like the sitting down to write a shorter list to say, okay, given what we know now, what would be the things that you'd like to see is something we should do. We've made our first estimate, right, with these summary reports that I think the plan is to go through and have a look at. But like clearly there's some things missing. When we have the nightly report, we're not showing you like this is how many observations we got, and this is what other things were happening, and this is how many hours the dome was open. So yeah, I think that this is a great time to sit down and try to sort that out. So I take your point, and I also think some of this is actually part of the work that I already think we needed to do.
I just want to clarify, I'm not saying that the math metrics aren't useful. It's that there will be different ones from what we thought of tenure, and we don't know what the names are to look for them are. So the fraction of nightly pairs that are completed, that's more important possibly. Now we did look at it. It's more important on Nightly Sense to know. I don't know what it's called anymore to go tell you to put that in, for example. Okay. But also just saying that in terms of the solar system metrics, we don't, I guess, as a community, understand how that quite ties to the total number of objects. Everyone will have a much better sense for understanding solar system processing found, X number of asteroids tonight, but over the last month it found this much, but then this month it had much less. What's going on, and trying to understand that. Then the math metric decreased. What does that mean? And so now that we're running, that's an easier metric for us to understand, but that actually is querying the prompt products database. And what I'm asking is that in play, or is it just, it must be within the math framework and calculated?
Oh, I see what you're, maybe I see what you're saying. When you say yes, it does. Some of this does include like the science collaborations being able to understand what they're seeing. When you say querying the prompt product database, I assume that means like in order to be able to see how many objects you've actually detected. Honestly, what we build into our monitoring stuff, if it's metadata that's available about the project, I think we can fold it in and we can include it. We at some point will have to start looking at what our processing requirements are to like evaluate it and consolidate it all. But I think first, like understanding what things are actually useful is important.
So in typical astronomer fashion, I have somewhere between a comment and a question. So the sort of commenty questiony bit is, typically I really appreciate the fact that the math metrics are automatically output. And in fact, the SCOC notebooks have always been super useful because there are ones about the desk, and there are separate ones about all the different groups. So it's given that if there's any capability to repeat those are always super useful, and they're a go-to. So my question is just, and I think this was already answered, so just say yes if so, but one way to help us with this math versus real data like interpolation that people have to do is if we have, essentially an OPSM file that represents what's actually been taken in some form, then you can look at the math metrics, see how many you expected objects, say what Meg is talking about, see how many you actually find, and you can then do that kind of interpolation. So I think that would be great if we could do that ASAP. And then the final thing I want to say, the SCOC has been super useful in helping us all plan and advocate for our science. And I would really strongly love if some version of this could continue, not only the SCOC, which I know will continue, but in other ways that it will help us when we look at the data, be able to give feedback. So that's okay, right?
take the shout out to TSUC. Thank you very much. I think we're all on the same page. Counting objects seems like a low hanging fruit, like being able to count object based on what was the expectation versus what has actually been detected. Obviously, this requires us to set up the detection and some sort of classification, but it seems like it's an obvious way for us to track progress. More questions and thoughts? If there are none, then I suggest we go look at the web pages. Oh, I don't know that you can. Oh, do you want to screen share from your lap? Okay, okay, perfect. Oh, you changed it. I didn't even notice.
Is this on now? Okay. So this is a plot that shows up on a few of the different pages. It is a plot of the survey exposures for a night overplotted on an outline of the footprint with a bunch of fairly busy additions. The purpose of this is to understand what's observable when and to see where what we actually observed fit into that. And so it's optimized for a slightly different use than many of the maps are used to. But it's dynamic, including when it's a static HTML page. The plot itself is dynamic because it's handled by JavaScript within the page. So you can just download the HTML if you want, or you can use a pre-generated one and don't have to worry about a backend running. But so there's a slider that goes by time of night, and you can slide it around to see what exactly was being observed. And you can see instances of the pairs being observed. So there's a set being observed there, and then it goes back. And so you can slide it back and forth through the night and see what was happening when. The dark line here, the dark oval here is the horizon. The red is an air mass limit. And so you can see where things were relative to the air mass. When I slide around the time, you can see why this particular projection is helpful, because the mapping between alt-az and the equatorial coordinates is just a rotation. The change in time is just a rotation. So that's helpful. The one on the left is actually shows it's not a very good projection for looking at statically, but the actual presentation is a sphere that you can move around, is I find probably the most useful way of picking up a 3D mental image of what's really going on. And so in a sense, if you've got that 3D model, it's the least distorted you can manage. So that is an easy way of getting an overview on what was observed when. The sun and moon are shown here. You can also guess how things are, or you can also, with a little experience, you can figure out what's observable at what time of year or when. So it's useful for that. Another piece that shows up on a few of these pages is just being able to plot scatter plots of values that are parameters of visits versus time. So I have air mass plotted, but most of what is available on the ConsDB can also be plotted. And again, this is somewhat interactive, and the interactivity is handled in the browser end, and so it doesn't need the back end to run. These are not interactive maps, but they show a variety of other things. So for example, this is the depth, and there are little black outlines that show what was actually observed. And so you can see whether we were observing places where we were under deep. Again, it's a fairly dizzy plot. There's a long text description saying what everything is. The most interesting thing to look at here is the red dashed ones, which mark the limits of what was available to see at the beginning and ending of the night. So it gives a good idea of, okay, what could be possibly observed at any time of the night. So the red ovals show the air mass limits at the beginning and ending of observing. And finally, there's the cadence plot, which I described briefly before, which just shows when DDF fields were observed. And in this case, it uses T effective, so it for each band, and so it represents the depth that you actually managed to get rather than number of exposures. Let's see. This is the longer version of this, which we were cutting down to try and come up with just the useful pieces of it. But it includes a number of things, including the text summary. This particular example night is actually fairly short. But there are things like various events from the EFD, when twilight was, comparisons between what was actually observed and what was simulated for the night, and some of the things that were also shown. Some gap information, and an actual, just the table of what all the visits were. And again, this is longer than we think anyone's going to want to look at, except perhaps us. And so this version is our initial guess of a cut down version for more public consumption. So this one, we produce a fairly similar report, but it's the report based on the simulated data for the upcoming night. So the idea is to give us an idea of what's going to happen tonight and to understand why. This again has some of the same information. It has the same kind of plot the other one did, just with the simulated visits. We have plots of where things are in horizon coordinates. We have, again, a similar timeline plot where you can plot brightest parameters versus time. And then we get into the nitty gritty of what exactly was the scheduler thinking at the time. So you can trace, this will require a lot more discussion with the scheduler to understand. But if you understand the architecture of the scheduler, this is very helpful for figuring out, oh, why exactly did it choose this target at this time? And there are a number of plots for that. And the zoom window is preventing me from choosing the tab there. This is the most primitive of our reports so far. This is the survey, the daily generated survey progress plot. Just has sort of accumulated number of visits, again, cadence plot for the DDFs, and a handful of example hourglass plots of different properties. We are looking for what properties should be present in this form. We can't do too many of them or else we'll just go to overwhelmed by them, but it's a useful way of seeing globally what have we done in the past day, month, year. More than a year gets a little bit hard to deal with. And this is sort of an initial version of a human constructed, what we'll be doing kind of on a monthly scale. Human decides, yes, we think this is an important thing for getting an idea of where we are. And so we have things like numbers of visits, map, the plots that we've just been discussing. And what else? Okay. And this last one is another example of the Times Square page.
Do you want me to talk about this one? Right?
Data.
Do you want me to talk about this one a minute?
I did not hear that.
Oh, sorry. Do you want me to talk about this, the Times Square notebook here?
Yeah, sure.
Actually, first, can I ask, how many people in the audience actually do have RSP, or sorry, USDF logins? Because it's not just RSP.
Actually,
It's a
not.
good
ba-
fraction, right?
So I think about a third of the room is raising their hand, maybe
Okay.
slightly less.
So currently the way to think about these pages that we're talking about here is they're testing grounds for us to figure out like what do we actually need to monitor? How can we get a handle on what's going on? And then as we find stuff in here that's useful, we'll probably promote it. We would promote it to things like the public facing reports. So but if you can log into the USDF, you can come and see these pages. They're just in the Times Square notebooks, which are a series of they're parameterized notebooks. So this is scheduled to run every day, and it'll give you a summary of what's going on. I should clarify some jargon. The ConsDB, we've talked about this a little bit. That's the consolidated database. The consolidated database is it tracks the metadata about the visits. So where the visits were pointed, what time they were taken, air mass, this kind of thing. And it also has some outputs from the processing that happens at the summit called, that's the rapid analysis pipeline. So it has some of this information. It's per visit, it's also per detector. We generally use the per visit information because when you're looking at the survey scheduling, we're usually interested in this from a per visit point of view. So this particular notebook, what it does, and this was is more useful right now to us because as we are in commissioning, we don't necessarily have the whole night available. So this notebook just like goes to the ConsDB and you specify the interval you want, and you say, give me the visits tell me about the visits that happened in this time frame. It also puts up some almanac information about like when sunrise, sunset was. The most relevant pieces out of this notebook, though, that we've found most useful, and maybe Eric can adjust the scroll a little bit to the right. I think that your laptop is a little bit smaller than mine. So if you can, can you go in there and scroll to the right? So you see
Actually, I think it's full screen left to right on
okay,
our
so maybe it's just
view.
not making it all the way to Zoom. The right, there's a column on the very right, which is SciFrac, and it's the science exposure time divided by the night length. So that's like telling us, hey, how much time did we actually use for science on this night? There's some other things that we like to track on here that sort of have to do with how we're using the time at the telescope and things that we might be able to understand with regards to planning in the future. And also
You're right, the column is hidden on our side too. I'm not sure why. Maybe I'll try to adjust it, but keep going.
Okay, and it does also tell you what other programs we're executing in the night. So this is a very consolidated version of what Meg was asking about, like how many visits did you take, what other programs were running, how much of the time is used for science, but it doesn't give you the words to summarize that. So it's true, it's not everything she would like. So that's the top part of this page. The bottom part underneath just sort of takes those same visits and groups them differently, saying, hey, how many visits have we had so far for these different programs? This is maybe less useful for us now than it was earlier in commissioning. And then if you scroll down a little bit further.
There's a hand raised.
Oh,
Jen,
yeah.
if I can interrupt you for a second.
Yeah, sure. Jen?
Jen Edelman. Jen Edelman McCarthy.
I'm sorry, that was an old hand.
I wondered about that because
Sorry about that. We didn't see it earlier.
I thought you might look a little bit more anxious to talk to us. So, okay, yeah, okay, great. Glad we didn't miss it. So and then down at the bottom, you can just, like Eric said earlier, you can just pull up different properties of the visits over that time. There are other data viewers within Rubin where you can, like in the portal aspect, for example, where you can pull up these different properties, and then I think you can even plot them against each other and do different kinds of things. So this is really just like an overview of what happened or what was going on. Okay, so this is we don't currently use this very much, except that it is I do like to come back and check in on it every now and then to see how we're doing about like start and close times, for example. So if you wanted to go to one of the other pages you were hoping to explore.
Okay.
Actually, do you
Think
mind
about
going-
this page?
hopping back to the survey strategy page for a minute? Because I wanted to point out something else about this. It's been mentioned a few times. So if you
Where do
stop
you
right
want-
there, nope, down a little bit,
Top
please.
right there.
Down a little bit more. A little bit more. Okay, notice this paragraph in the middle. Okay. Maybe this needs to go to the top of the page. I don't know. People have been asking about OPSIM databases that have the visits that have been acquired so far. This database linked on this page is the visits that have been acquired so far from the ConsDB, the consolidated database, and then also the visits that we would simulate to the end of survey. We probably need to add some flags in here so you can like very quickly distinguish between the two, but it is actually not that difficult to distinguish between which visits are which.
So Lynn, I have a question then. So if I download the SV 2025-0729 database, can I run the maths on it? Does it have the
Yeah.
same database structure?
Yes, in fact, those plots
Brilliant.
that you see further up on the page were generated with math running on that database. Well, maybe not these. Well, yes, they were on these ones. And then I just did a cut at the time where I knew I turned over from simulated to observed.
I don't know if you can tell, but the room was happy to hear this.
I mean, I've heard that people saying, yes, can we have OPSIM databases? And yes, you can have OPSIM databases. They're linked from here. I actually need to talk to Tim Jeunesse because we were talking about how do we add DOIs so that these are citable. I will point out if you go to the page that is, not all of these are separated by weeks. I was kind of hoping to do these weekly, but if you notice some of them are more densely spaced, it's because maybe something was going on with the telescope that I kind of wanted to know a little bit more about. But the one on the 2025-0714 is the particular time when I ran one of these simulations for the 3I Atlas paper. So that one is I'm kind of happy about that one for sure. And actually, you know, Robert had that question earlier. If you go to the very first page or first.
Meg has her hand raised. So
Oh, sorry, I missed
do you
it.
want to?
Yeah, partly because you're on this page. I want to emphasize that I think that the Observing Strategy website does a really good job of trying to balance a lot of information with trying to get people the minimum, like the minimum exposure to it. I think something that has the spirit of this needs to be part of what what is the observatory is building to show us what's going on. Because as I see all these web pages, my anxiety keeps going up because it's so much overload. And I worry is that this is useful when you understand what's going on into deep dive, and that just thinking about, can you get the broader overviews while allowing all the detail you want to give people that will want to dive in. And I worry is that like we're going to have so many people diving into Rubin at the start, they're going to want to understand what's going on. Just that the level and the spirit that has been in this Observing Strategy website, and even this page I really appreciated because all the other links that I got, I couldn't really understand. This I could. And so just to emphasize that, if I thought this was really nice, building that spirit into what is going to be built to show would be really helpful of having that balance. Because I think these pages do an amazing job, and especially this page here that you're showing. So I just wanted to highlight that.
Yeah, I really was trying to keep these like brief. And I hope we don't like get too bogged down into lots of extra things. That this is intended to be like, here's what's going on, and then pass it along to other pages, the nightly content. Yeah, and you know, we were talking on Slack there a little bit, and it may be that what we actually need is sort of customized nightly reports, because there's a lot of things that you were listing that I'm like, I don't think anybody else is going to care. And the problem we've had so far is that as we get lots of metrics where only some people care about them, this is where it starts getting very overwhelming, right? So
I'm going to give the microphone to Gregory and then Robert Lynn.
I'm just thinking about this kind of in real time here, from the perspective of being product owner for the RSP. Obviously, we want RSP users to have easy access to some overview level information about the survey progress, and also about perhaps also the OBSLOC tab type information about what's the predicted observations in the near future. And we don't have that integrated into the portal. It was mentioned earlier by Lynn, I think, that you can make a lot of these correlation plots in the portal as well if you know what you're doing. But I was also thinking maybe we should try to think of some simple way that we could get some basic information about the survey directly accessible to the portal via kind of a convenient query, and then have it set up so that if you wanted to know more, you could link to these detailed pages, because that would keep people in their kind of default environment in the RSP if they only want to ask some sort of superficial questions and not necessarily drill down. So that might be an interesting thing for us to explore. It wasn't really planned that way, but it's yeah.
Thank you. We should talk about it. I'm going to pass the microphone to Robert.
I mean, we're building this nightly digest, which is also a weekly or monthly digest, to provide the easy high-level interface into this stuff. So I don't think we need perhaps to add it to the RSP. The intention is you'll be able to go there, get a summary of what we did last night or over the last week, get the highest level plots from here. You want to see seeing versus time or n number of visits against the sky. We would then use these tools. And then, as Gregory said, you would have a click back to these sort of pages. We're very much intending to provide a high level, you can look at it casually every morning and see what happened, and a way to go down to why are my objects not being observed with my metric. So I think that it's not, I think, public at the moment. You have to have RSP access. We can solve that. We can get the night logs out. I'm working on improving the night logs, and that's a little tricky because we can't say, here's the summary, let's put the other information in the night logs. But this is very much something we are working on as part of commissioning the instrument.
Thank you, Robert. There was another hand raised.
This is Nacho Sevilla. So I've been gathering like a few suggestions to be considered or not, but I guess the question that it all boils down to is, how can we transmit this sort of proposals or suggestions for these visualizations? What is the correct channel to talk to you guys for this? I mean, other than direct message, of course, but
there's a Slack channel for the scheduler team, which works. I think you could also make a community post and that would work. Or you can talk to us and that work. We can be reached any of these ways.
I would recommend community maybe a good, that we're trying to make this kind of suggestions more consolidated on community rather than Slack,
Okay,
perhaps. Yeah.
any of those is fine with me.
Good. Lynn, did you wanna, Gregory again? And then Lynn, if you wanted to add anything else, this session ends at 3, I believe, yeah? So we only have about 10 minutes.
So there's the flip side of what I just said is also that if you're in this environment, I noticed there were various things in here, like if you scrolled all the way down, there was a table of observations and so on. I think there's also a lot that we could do in maybe not even the distant future, maybe even the near future, to do some simple things that would make it easier to get from here to the data in the RSP. So that if you saw something interesting, like an outlier in one of these, like something that was taken at a, unusual air mass or whatever, that then you could go easily and retrieve that specific data item in a notebook in the portal to examine it. And I think we can do some pretty simple things to increase the two-way integration of this.
Yeah, so I think the integration would be useful, although a lot of some of the integration gets away from the intent of these pages, which is very much scheduler focused. On the other hand, there will certainly be times where people end up in a different, an interface with a different intent than the one they approached it with. And they might want to, I want to go look at this. Or maybe they were looking at the list of visits. And I think a more scheduler focused one is, this one looked like it was unusually close to the moon, like right at the edge. Let's see if that affected it. So that the kinds of questions that would make sense to ask if you're looking at a scheduler focused page. I think for a lot of these kinds of questions, the integration with the tool that Robert's been discussing is also important, because that's much more intended to be a general, not just focused on the scheduler, but on the generic user.
Lynn, did you want to show anything on these web pages?
Well, I realized that Eric has downloaded this page, and so I think that I maybe can't. I was asking him to go to a different date, and I'm sure he was saying, no, please no.
No, the page is live. This page is live. We're accessing it live on the internet. It's not
No,
downloaded.
it is actually on my local download.
Oh.
So I was worried about the net connection, so I downloaded.
Yeah, because
the
we
pages
have
I knew I
not
wanted.
great connectivity at the moment.
So this one is actually local to mine, but
So Lynn, did you want to show anything? Anything else?
It's fine.
I could
Honestly,
stop
I was
sharing
just.
and you could share, Lynn.
Oh, well, I mean, we only have a few more minutes. It's
Yeah.
fine. All I was going to say is if you did go to the earlier nights and then you looked at that, cumulative visit history, the plot that's just a little bit further down the page from this, you would see that at an earlier time in the survey, we did predict that we would have many more visits. So, yeah, I mean, I think that Robert's question in particular about like, how have you changed your survey strategy simulation over time can kind of be addressed when you look at some of those as well. But yeah, I would just say like this website in general, it's survey-strategy.lssc.io, and this is where we'll have like high level reports on the survey progress. We'll have links to the other reports that we have. It also has commentary about what the current baseline strategy is, including some very brief description of like changes as we go through the different versions. Has links to the SEOC content, like their reports, and any other information that we've had. And it also has some links to some other resources like the MAF and scheduler documentation.
And I just wanted to maybe add as just maybe one part of the closing points is just to say, I think is when we talk about users and just the fact people raising their hand, how many are in the USDF. Even I'm not a common user because I've been embedded for 8 years thinking about this stuff. And I'm at least seeing in my science collaboration, lots of people who are just getting involved. And so I guess just the point to raise is every interaction Ruben has had has been with odd, like not the standard user, because we have such a user base coming in that know nothing. And I just want to remind that because sometimes you forget because we're all loud, and I know I'm one of them, chiming in your ears, but that we're not, there's going to be a whole bunch of people that come to this will thinking very differently and need a huge step out. And I'm not sure, and that may be something where the CST can come in, but just thinking about that, because even DP1, I'm sure I'm imagining there are some people stepping forward, but given the size of it, I know there's so many more people I saw jumping on the 3i paper. It did nothing. It did nothing in our science collaboration. And we're then kind of getting very quickly trying to get up to speed about Ruben. And so just maybe something to think about is that's the people I'm trying to think about is how are they going to know where even this room and the people here, we're the super users of the Ruben data right now. And so how do you balance, what is probably the majority of the community who's not here or again, just trying to get up to speed.
So honestly, that was part of the reason for building this particular website. And I don't know if people really have picked up that it exists. Like certainly the description of the baseline strategy is intended to answer a lot of the questions we often have, like, hey, how are you actually just observing the sky? So I get your point, Meg. I think it's going to be an interesting challenge. And I think also it's not necessarily something that we've maybe not super thought about a lot because, well, not super thought about, I wouldn't say that, but like, I do feel like there's maybe a little bit of a gap in terms of reporting on a short time scale to the community. Like, as Eric was pointing out, a lot of our pages are sort of like, what do we need in order to do our job? And it turns out that a lot of the things we need to do our job are probably interesting to other people as well. So we've tried to make some of them public. And then the nightly digest is going to be a great tool as well. But that is actually originally aimed for like the people managing what's happening at the observatory. It's not necessarily aimed at like, okay, and here's what we need for the general community. And so I think there's a little bit more coordination we could stand to do there. And yeah, the community science team is probably also, you know, a helpful resource. Certainly they're the contact point for things like how do we use the data in the data releases. So
Thank you, Lynn. I think this concludes the session. And please don't forget, there is an unconference next, and you can choose your own adventure. And we'll see you tomorrow with the plenary, the science plenary, the most exciting of all, perhaps. Bye.